I think that that's why maternal mental health has become so important to me, even more so than regular mental health, even though I live with a mental illness, because it's something that's not talked about as candidly, because as moms, we are so fearful that we are going to lose the one thing that we've worked so hard to be able to protect and keep safe. But I want to change that stigma, and I want to say, hey, it's okay to vocalize it. They're not going to take your baby away. Like, we're just here to help, and let's all figure out the safest and best way to make you the best version of yourself.
Welcome to Hope Starts With Us, a podcast by NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illness. I'm your guest host, Barb Solish, NAMI's National Director of Innovation, joining Hope Starts With Us today to discuss a topic I care deeply about with two women who I admire and I'm so excited to chat with. NAMI started this podcast because we believe that hope starts with us. Hope starts with us talking about mental health. Hope starts with us making information accessible. Hope starts with us providing resources and practical advice. Hope starts with us sharing our stories. Hope starts with us breaking the stigma. If you or a loved one is struggling with a mental health condition and have been looking for hope, we made this podcast for you. Hope starts with all of us. Hope is a collective. So we hope that each episode with each conversation brings you into that collective so you know you are not alone. Hi everyone, I'm Barb Solish, your guest host today. Just to introduce myself a little, like so many people who come to NAMI, I live with mental health conditions. My symptoms started early in my teen years, but I didn't get treatment until my college age time. So it turns out that I'm a statistic. 11 years is the average delay between the onset of symptoms and treatment. So I'm at NAMI because I want to change that. I'm also here because I lost a dear friend to suicide in 2017. His family turned to NAMI in their darkest hour, and they found support and hope when they needed it the most. So it's an honor to work here, and it's an honor to host today's episode on a topic that means so much to me professionally, but also as a mom. May is Maternal Mental Health Awareness Month, and we're shining a light on the experiences of moms living with mental health conditions, whether they've been managing them for years or only since pregnancy. So let me share a quick snapshot of maternal mental health. Maternal mental health refers to mental well-being during the perinatal period, which means during pregnancy and up to about 2 years after birth. Every year, 500,000 pregnant women in the U.S. experience a mental health condition, but 75% of them don't get the mental health treatment they deserve. So there's a lot to discuss on this topic. I am thrilled that I'm joined today by two incredible guests, Kate Kennedy-Lynch, NAMI's Director of External Relations, and Alessandra Torresani, a NAMI Ambassador. Kate, Alessandra, can you kick us off by introducing yourselves and sharing a little bit about how you found NAMI and your mental health journeys?
So as Barb said, I'm Kate Kennedy-Lynch. I'm the Director of External Relations for NAMI National, which means that I have the immense pleasure of working with our incredible corporate partners and funders to ensure that the work NAMI does continues to happen. I actually started my career in event production, so I have a little bit of a career journey. Straight out of college, I was on the sales. I was kind of a sales associate at a catering company down here outside of DC. And then after that, moved up to New York City and was working for an incredible agency there, producing events of all shapes and sizes. And then in 2019, had our daughter, which was very exciting. And as soon as she was born, I felt terrible. And so I would talk to other friends who had babies around the same time. They'd say like, oh, I feel pretty good. I'd say, I have no idea what that means. Like, I just have no idea. And so finally there was some email from some list that said, if you feel baby blues for a few days, it's one thing. If you're feeling symptoms for 2 weeks or more, you should probably seek some help. So I took that as my sign. And that was about 6 weeks. So I, told my OBGYN when I went in for my singular, postpartum check-in. And she recommended some therapists and things. And of course, that list was mixed in terms of people being available on that list and practices having closed and things. And so finally, then I asked the facilitator, I guess, of our new parent support group that I went to at a yoga studio in Brooklyn. I'm still friends with a lot of those moms, actually, which is very nice. But she recommended some folks. And so I reached out and I explained some of my symptoms to this therapist. And I'm happy to talk about my symptoms too, just as a content note. I'm happy to share them. So if you want to fast forward, you certainly can. But the story that I told her that sort of led to the diagnosis was that I was having some suicidal ideation, which is why I flagged this for my mom and my doctor. But then the story that I told my therapist one time is that my daughter this was much later, actually. She was 7 or 8 months. Like, she was sitting up. I remember we were sitting on the ground at the playground. She picked up a piece of bark, like, from the playground and popped it in her mouth, as babies do. And we fished it out of her mouth right away, no problem. But I sat there and just stared at her and thought, like, what if I had it? What if there's still a piece in her throat? What if there's still something that's going to get stuck there and it's going to ruin her life? Like, what do we do? Do I stick my finger back in there? Are we sure we got everything? Like, I can't believe I did that. Can't believe I let her put that in her mouth. And so I told her that, and she said, you know what I think you have? She said, beyond postpartum depression or postpartum anxiety, she said, I think you have postpartum OCD. And I said, what is that? I had no idea. I'd never heard of it. In 2019, it feels like the postpartum anxiety conversation was just starting. And so that was when I sort of was like, oh, there's this, sort of spiraling thoughts aspect to this. And what are my compulsions? Like, I don't know what my compulsions, I was like, oh, I wash the bottle parts all the time. And those kinds of things. But the obsessive thinking was actually sort of the outstanding piece of my journey. So then I had my son in, continued therapy. I had my son in 2022 after I had come to NAMI in 2021, and felt really good after his birth. I finally felt, I remember saying to my mom, like, this is what people talk about whenever they feel good after birth. And then slowly but surely, about a year later, as I was weaning breastfeeding, all my symptoms came rushing back. And having the opportunity to be at NAMI, I'd talked to colleagues far and wide who shared their stories and talked about SSRIs or antidepressants, who talked about antipsychotics, who talked about their journey with, we were talking about long-acting injectables with some of our partners. Like, really, it, for me, changed my perception of medication. And so that was when I sought treatment with a psychiatrist, restarted my therapy journey, and finally feel like things are, in a pretty good place. So.
Can I ask a follow-up question before I go?
Of course.
I feel like I'm in the middle of a therapy session right now where I'm feeling this like aha moment where I've heard of the postpartum OCD, but it's something that was never brought up to me, I guess. I guess I'll get into my story, but I always felt mine was just postpartum anxiety. But when you just said the compulsive thoughts and all that stuff, I'm like, that is exactly what I had. And like, I never heard that.
Yeah.
It makes so much sense because I am someone who suffers OCD and I have my whole life. And it's funny, it's always helped me in the benefits of my mathematics in class, where I was a number OCD person, where, I always had to add things to become one number. Or if I see a license plate, I have to remember that number. Those are the kind of compulsions. It's less the typical OCD people think. It's like, oh, you're just a clean freak, or you're like washing your hands all the time. Like, mine is definitely mathematical, but I was having such obsessive thoughts over and over every single day that certain things would trigger. And so hearing you say that, I'm kind of like, oh my God, like, I need to go talk to somebody because that's exactly what I'm going through still.
Yeah, it's wild, isn't it? I had a colleague actually come forward too after I think I shared my story somewhere within the organization. And she said, I had that too. And I thought I was the only person. And I said, me too. I mean, I was the only one that I knew who had that diagnosis. But it's on the International OCD Foundation website as a sort of subset of OCD. Like, it's a real thing.
It's a real
Yeah.
thing. Wow. Well, Kate, that was so beautiful. Wow. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I remember you talking to me actually shortly after starting medication. And I remember you saying, I've lived with this for so long, and all of a sudden for you, the voices of those compulsions and those intrusive thoughts quieted, and how that was just so different. And but you being open about that to me was special too. Like, just having these conversations makes a really big difference.
Yeah, it really does. It really does.
So Alessandra, tell us a little bit about your story.
Oh my gosh, I have so much that I want to share, but I'll do it in a very like pint-sized version. I'm an actress, and I'm very in touch with my emotions. I've always have been my entire life. I feel like I was born to do this. But for me, I was showing signs of what I did not know was bipolar 1 disorder from a very, very, very young age, starting at about 3 years old, maybe even a little bit before. But I was not formally diagnosed until I was about 21 years old, after having a severe panic attack on a set and actually being diagnosed, or not being diagnosed, but being introduced to the concept of bipolar disorder from an acupuncturist who actually worked with a lot of creative types. And I was explaining my symptoms and all the things. And he said, I really think that you need to talk to a professional and bring up bipolar disorder. This sounds maybe possibly this is what it could be. This was after, Barb, we were talking how it takes 11 years for a diagnosis. This is after years of me being put on antidepressants, and that made my highs higher and my lows lower and gave me suicidal ideations that I never had before. The misdiagnosis is that's a whole nother episode and a whole nother story where that it's so tricky, right? And still here we are, someone who's right. I'm an ambassador. I believe in therapy. I believe in medication. And I'm like, wait a second, Kate, I feel like that's what I have. And I never heard that before. It's always a new discovery. So when I chose to start trying to have a baby, I actually got off my medication slowly. It was a very long process with lots of doctors and lots of professionals around me, guiding me through, making sure I was okay. And while the second trimester was very tough for me, which is apparently supposed to be the happiest trimester, for me, it was not. And so hearing that stigma over and over, I felt like, oh, something's wrong with me. Like, I should be happy. Why am I feeling the worst I've ever felt? Why do I not want to continue on? I had my baby, and she's here now, and she's almost 3, and she's wonderful. Her name is Lady, but something that I was not expecting, even though I host a mental health podcast and I had all the maternal mental health specialists on, I was not expecting to get postpartum anxiety. I was not expecting to have severe, graphic, intrusive thoughts all the time. I wasn't expecting any of this. And so even though I was prepared from hearing all these stories and all this, I didn't know what to experience because I hadn't experienced it yet. And I felt scared to talk about, even through my pregnancy, I felt scared to talk about if I was having suicidal ideations, if I was having these severe intrusive thoughts, very scary, graphic things, because I was like, oh, they're going to take my baby away from me. So I don't want to say anything, and I was very lucky to have had created so many resources through NAMI, through my own podcast, through just friends and family, and having that support system around me. But it's a very scary, lonely time. And I don't know if you girls went through this, but I had such a support system, and I felt lonelier than I ever had in my entire life, which was crazy. Right? You're like, why, but now to look back at it, but I find that it was a blessing that I experienced what I did in a way, because now I feel finally at a part of my journey, almost 3 years postpartum, where I can talk to other moms who may be going through it. Kate, I'm so happy that you shared what you did, because now I'm like, oh, that's what that was. Okay, now I can identify that. Now I can go and work on that issue that still is inside me. But just on a side note, I think a lot of women have wonderful first pregnancies and they think, oh, this is amazing. And they have the postpartum experience is wonderful. And then it's almost the second time around that sometimes it could be really triggering, or something comes up, or you get the postpartum anxiety and you didn't have it the first time. So you think something's severely wrong. And I actually have been, speaking with a few people in my life who are on that second journey, through pregnancy and postpartum, and they didn't experience it the first time. And so I'm so lucky that I have these resources and I can be like, you know what? I think you should listen to this podcast. I think this is going to help you. Or I think you should reach out to this organization. There's a great, mom group or a mom circle that you can join. I think that that's why maternal mental health has become so important to me, even more so than regular, mental health, even though I live with a mental illness, because it's something that's not talked about as candidly, because as moms, we are so fearful that we are going to lose the one thing that we've worked so hard to be able to protect and keep safe, but I want to change that stigma. And I want to say, hey, it's okay to vocalize it. They're not going to take your baby away. Like, we're just here to help, and let's all figure out the safest and best way to make you the best version of yourself. That was a really long-winded answer. I'm sorry.
No, it was so helpful. It was so helpful. And, I can relate to you a lot. One, because I have both bipolar type 2. And going into pregnancy, it was so challenging to talk about medication and to figure out what I needed to do and what was risky, what was not risky, and this whole range of things. But there was actually an element for me of feeling like it was a hidden strength in that I knew what to look for mental health conditions, right? Even though, you may not feel like you can act on them, maybe you're not going to get ask for the support, but at least you know what signs and symptoms there are for your mental health condition that you currently have, right?
I chime in on that. Yeah, I had the opposite experience. Supposedly, in talking to therapists and psychiatrists and stuff over the years, I guess I probably lived with an element of OCD before this happened, right? It's always been there to some degree, but I had no idea what to look for. And I had, the things that I was experiencing were so different than things on the Instagram carousels about postpartum depression. And it just didn't look like anything that anybody was experiencing. And then Alessandra, to your point, which thank you for sharing your incredible story. I felt like I was sitting there, I was living in New York City, have an incredible partner and this beautiful baby. And I was like, why do I feel so, I had a job. Everything was, on the surface, very, right. Everything should have come out a certain way. And, that feeling of, and I think it's a mom feeling like I should be able to do it all and I shouldn't feel terrible. And I have all the resources in the world, but still feel so bad. It's an interesting, thing to experience sort of for the first time on the back end of pregnancy too. So it's so interesting to hear your all stories kind of heading into pregnancy that way. And then mine is coming out of pregnancy. So it's such an all encompassing conversation.
So let me ask you then, both of you, what you wish both respectively would have known. So whether having a mental health condition or not, wish someone would have said up front, hey, FYI, this. What could have been helpful to you?
I don't know, because that's my honest answer, because I'll say this. Someone had recently reached out and was like, hey, what are your top maternal mental health episodes of your podcast? Can you send them to me? And I was looking back at them and I was like, oh my God, I can't believe I had one of the heads of Cedars-Sinai. It's a huge hospital here. It's where I gave birth. She was one of the heads of the, postpartum area, my mom brain, right? That's a real thing. One of the areas. And anyways, I had this specialist on, and I didn't listen to anything she said. I didn't digest anything, right? I listened. I edited the podcast. I was the one that put it out. I was the one that did the social media. But I guess I didn't absorb it in the way that I wanted to, because there were so many incredible resources and things that she had given in that episode that I was just at a loss. And I think when, you're just so drained after birth, that it's so hard for you to think about anything else, because you literally switch, especially the first 6 weeks of like, you go into survival mode, and you're like, I have to survive and I have to keep this baby alive. And I remember I wouldn't even let my husband push the buggy because I was like, oh my gosh, the buggy's going to let go. It's going to go down the street. Like it's going to like fall and crash. And like, that's it. And I mean, that was going through the first 6 weeks. And then it continued with the intrusive obsessive thoughts, So, I mean, I guess the thing that I wish I knew is I wish I knew earlier other moms that maybe were going through immediately what I was going through, because hearing it from someone who's experienced it, that was great. But the moment I felt heard and the moment I felt like a safe space, if you will, was when I started a mom music class. And it was like, I think lady was like 11 weeks old. And I was like a crazy person hosting it at my house. I was like, I don't care. Like, I just need these moms, because it was the actual physical connection of just knowing someone else is experiencing something at the same time as you, and to know you're not alone. Like, I think that that's what I wish I had. It's not what I wish I knew. I wish I had that a little bit earlier going through it. Yeah.
I love that. I love that. My mother-in-law actually told me, hey, sign up for a support group now. And that was like when I was 6 months pregnant. Sign up now. And it wasn't a specific sport. It was just moms getting together. And it made such a big difference. We met like 3 weeks after I'd given birth. So right away, really. And you start that community and it makes a really big difference. And I'll make a quick plug for our partner, our friends at Postpartum Support International. They have amazing support groups, free support groups online for all sorts of postpartum conditions, for pregnancy loss and so much more. So
Oh, I love that.
Oh, they're fantastic. Yeah. And I'm in a similar boat. I think that was one of the things too, that I don't know if anybody told me that, or if it was something that we just kind of found in our yoga studio, the new parent support group. But it is the one thing that I always pass along too. Like, if you do one thing, get yourself some people around you who have experienced or are experiencing the same thing. Like you said, Alessandra, at the same time. I think I'm similar to you, actually. I don't know that there's anything that it would have been nice to know about postpartum OCD. Like, would have been nice to know that existed. But, this is the first time that I'm speaking in sort of a public way about it. But I speak pretty widely, even if privately, about my experience, because I just feel like if I had known somebody, if I had seen somebody who was going through it or talked about it or said, I'm thinking about medication, or, oh yeah, I take medication, like whatever, it's no big deal. I think that would have changed my own perception of myself more than anything else, that it's a thing that people experience and, it shows up fairly commonly. And so I think I'm actually the same. I think that it's part of the reason that I share my story so much is because I really needed that. And I think it's such an important piece of a postpartum journey.
Yeah.
Thank you, Kate. Thanks so much for sharing too, both of you. I mean, this is like, it's a big deal. It's a big deal to share your story, and it makes a huge impact, as you were saying.
Like with you both, I feel like I'm in this is like my two best friends, like, because we've all experienced it.
Yeah, we've been through it.
That's why I'm so strong on community. And I feel like, honestly, the moms that I, started this music class with, I'm still so close with them years later, because, some of them are on to their second and some are on to their third babies already, and it's just like being able to know that we went through it together, and like the tough times, and, is your baby doing this? Like, are they hitting this milestone? And it was less about like a competitive edge. It was more of just like, hey, I'm really going through a tough time. Can someone help me out here? Like, or what do you recommend? Or, we had a friend in our group whose father, got very sick with cancer and passed away during that experience. And, she really just counted on all the moms to kind of get together and just do like a circle of good energy. And so I feel like that's why it's so important. It's less about like being like friends, like, so your babies have friends. It's not about that. It's about you. I'll say one more thing that I wish that people would have said to me. I wish that people would have put more postpartum care on my baby shower and like your baby registry. Like, there's this amazing company called Anya, and they're a postpartum like supplements. They have tonics. It's all about like, helping with your breast milk. It's a very like It's an amazing company. It's fabulous. But I wish like that was on my birthing, whole thing, like for everything. Like it was, I didn't need a baby onesie. You know what I mean? Like that was nice, but it was like, I don't think we care about the mom going through that. And it's of no anyone's fault. It's just, I think that maybe if you are a mom, be more sensitive to that and make sure the mom's okay. Like bring them soup, and it just the postpartum care of like community and family. Like we forget we're tribes, you know what I mean? It was like we used to have like these huge like families that would take care of one another for weeks on end, and you didn't have to worry about that. We don't have that anymore. And so if you could be that family and that tribe for your friend, like I think you could do that.
Community is so important, so important with family. And I will say there's pluses and minuses. I'm thinking because there's no shortage of advice when you're pregnant, I feel like, from your community. Like don't eat sushi, don't take hot baths, don't sneeze too hard. But not a lot about mental health. That feels a little murkier. I did not get a lot of information going through pregnancy about my mental health. I had my own information working at NAMI and my own experience, but I'm curious if you all have any thoughts on like misconceptions or myths you've heard about pregnancy or motherhood and mental health. Anything that you feel like that should maybe be cleared up.
I mean, I feel like everyone told me the second trimester was like the best. And so that was like the biggest myth or misconception I had, is like, everyone's like, oh, once you get the first trimester, once you get through it, like it's so beautiful. And then you like the third trimester gets tough again. And so for me, I felt like truly an insane person that needed to be in like a hospital, because I was so mentally ill and so sick at that point. And I just felt like the world was caving in on me. And I didn't understand hearing other people say that this should be the most joyous time. And I think when you're told something and you're feeling the complete opposite, you're like, something's wrong. Like I'm sick. But then I was afraid to admit that I was sick because I had done so well on not being on the medication and taking almost a year to, conceive so we could not be on the medication, and so I think that was really, really tough. And I would say that, yeah, I think that everyone's experience is different. And so never say, oh, once you get through this moment, you'll be fine, because you don't know if someone's going to be fine.
It's great advice.
Yeah, that is great advice. I don't know if it's a myth so much, but, and maybe it's a little bit back to our last part of our last conversation too, but I feel like it would be amazing to have a little bit more postpartum mental health care built into the postpartum period, or more opportunities for check-ins, or just the normalization of, Alessandra, like you were saying, like everybody's experience being so different. And so in the postpartum period, I think it would be amazing if we're able to ensure that somebody in Women's Circle, whether it's a clinician or part of the, continuum of care or whatever it is, or if it's just like somebody in their lives, is not saying like, don't eat this, this isn't how you swaddle a baby, don't, like somebody's saying, hey, how are you doing? How are you holding up? And not just in a like, oh, I'm not sleeping, but really in a, but like, is that okay? Are you okay though? I think that's kind of the, like if you listeners, dear listeners, if you can be that person in somebody's life and just be there to listen to them and support them. And I think that would be the nicest.
Something that I experienced that I just thought of that really actually helped me a lot is, I practiced transcendental meditation, but it was really hard once the baby came to continue that practice. But something that I did do, and it's not for everyone and it's very woo-woo, but I did hypnobirthing. And of course, it didn't go as planned, my birth experience, like, all this stuff, but there was something about me training my brain to kind of be in the moment, be present, and the hypnosis part of it helped so much throughout, I would say, my postpartum journey as well, because I would listen back to those hypnosis is and the hypno songs and stuff like that. And it kind of just put my soul kind of at ease, like when I was feeling that stress and that anxiety. So if you are, currently pregnant, I would look into it, because it was something that was really helpful actually postpartum to me as well. Like that helped out, instead of like, you can't go and do a yoga class the second week you're, giving birth, you can't get right back. If you're someone that exercises all the time and that's your way of kind of clearing your mind, you can't go back and do that right away, especially if you have a C-section, or if you have, I had a really bad birth experience with hemorrhaging. So like I couldn't go back for a very long time. This was something to kind of put my mind at ease without sitting there and being like, it was a good way to kind of just clear my mind. And I would really just recommend that. That was just something I wanted to throw in there.
No, I love that. I found an app that was about hypnobirthing as well. And it was like my version of the Calm or the Headspace app.
Yeah, it just helps.
It was great. It was really great. And that's one of the things I think I would have never, it's not me to like want to do that, but I tried it and it was great. I think for me, some of the myths and misconceptions, I was really worried about medication as being pregnant with medication. And I spent a lot of anxious time researching, seeing specialists, seeing what I could be on and not be on, and weighing the risks. And I think there's sometimes a flat, and I'm not speaking to all people, but there's this assumption that you cannot be taking a single thing to be pregnant, or it's dangerous. And of course, there's risks for all things, as we learn when we talk about eating sushi or all of those things. But there are really great resources, really great doctors who specialize in maternal mental health that you can see and consult on your medications. Massachusetts General Hospital has a Center for Women's Mental Health, and they have pretty much every medication and the latest research on it related to pregnancy and postpartum. So it was something I thought, I'm going to have to change everything in order to get and be pregnant and have a healthy pregnancy. And that just didn't have to be the case. Certain things had to change, but you also have to prioritize your own mental health too. And that is a huge piece of health as well. So that was just something that came up a lot for me, and it was a big worry. So I just, wanted to share that as well. I mean, this has just been such a great conversation.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. That's such a good myth to share, and encouragement, I think, for people to really look into it and think, talk to their physicians and the people involved in their birthing journeys, and make sure that they can stay healthy, because that is they, as like the birthing parent and mother, like can stay healthy, because that is half, if not more, of the puzzle, right? Like you have to keep the parent healthy. Mental health is a huge part of that.
I think that goes to your point about asking parents how they're doing, because so often we're focused so much on new life, and which is so obviously makes total sense. But somebody has to care for that new life, and they need to be healthy to do that. So it's really important to keep all of those perspectives. I'm curious, now that your kiddos are all earthside and pregnancy, postpartum, rear view mirror, I'm just curious how becoming a parent has shaped the way you care for and manage your mental health now.
I think, as I said in the beginning, it has changed everything for me. Medication has been life-saving. And I think even if you have a, medium mental health condition, it can change your life. Like it doesn't have to be suicidal ideation. I had an appointment with my psychiatrist early on. She actually specializes in reproductive psychiatry, which is incredible. So I love talking to her and just getting her thoughts on, all kinds of things like perimenopause, just like things that are just coming into the sort of fray, the normal conversation now. But I remember talking to her and she said there are two things, because I was kind of like, I don't know, medication. And like, am I really going to do this? Like, is that the right fit for me? Can't I just like muscle through it? And, what some of what she said was like, well, you're already seeing a therapist. You're already exercising most days. You're already like eating well and generally taking care of yourself and trying to sleep as often as possible. Like, she's like, it seems like you might need a little help. The other two things she offered was the first one was you have to think about the dynamics of your family. And it was not in a blame way. So it was like not in a way that was like, it's your fault if your family's a mess. It was like you have to think about the way you interact with your kids and the way you interact with the world and what they will learn from that and what they will learn from you. And, we're all going to mess up our kids in some way. So, like, why not eliminate that one at least? She didn't say that. I said that. But the other piece was she said, you have one life. You have one life to live. And so why spend it feeling bad when you could try this and potentially feel better? And I sort of looked at her and I was like, well, that was a convincing argument. Like, and that was after our second was born. So that was really a year and a half. So 2023, somewhere 2023, I'd been with NAMI for 2 years. And I was all still sort of like, but is the medication route really the route? Do I need to? And so, and that was, like after my symptoms had returned, basically after that postpartum period. And so even a year and a half out, like we talk about the postpartum period being 2 years, I think it's kind of like 3 or more. Like, you're never really truly the same after you give birth. It's part of the reason I'm so passionate about what NAMI does. And having these conversations, it has encouraged me to take care of my mental health. I speak openly to my friends about being in therapy. I encourage other people to seek help a lot, especially other moms or birthing parents. Like, it's just an important part of the process. You just have to ask for help. Why suffer if you can get the help that you need,
Thank you, Kate.
That was so beautiful.
Thanks. I mean it very sincerely.
I think something that's changed for me is everything with my mental health. In a really weird way, I feel like my brain has been completely reprogrammed. And I'd be curious, Barb, with you, because we do have a similar diagnosis. Yes, bipolar 1 and 2 is very different, but it is similar. I do wonder if you almost feel at some part like, oh, it's not as bad as it was. I don't know if that's just me. And I think it's because my brain was completely rewired to focus on this human that I brought into the world. And I don't have time to sometimes be sitting in the intrusive, like the obsessive thoughts that I used to. My obsessive thoughts are now more about her life and like, oh God, is she doing, it's more about that opposed to me spiraling as what I found, which I don't think is healthy either, but I'm working on it, this is a little bit different, but I think something that's drastically changed about my own mental health is being aware of putting a word to the feelings and like allowing her to understand what that is. I never felt shame with mental health or with the diagnosis. At a very young age, my mom at 5 had me in hypnotherapy trying to figure out, why I had certain symptoms, not knowing it was bipolar disorder. She was my biggest advocate. But I think that we have language now for certain feelings, for certain actions. Me being someone who lives with bipolar disorder, I can see certain signs in younger children that maybe we didn't know what it was. So for me, I'm kind of very open with my mental illness with my daughter. Yes, she's 2.5, but we are talking about that because I want her to know right now mom needs to take a bath and I need a moment because otherwise I'm not going to be healthy. And like, it's okay to take that moment for yourself to do that. We try to teach her breath work. We have her meditate with us, just so she can regulate her emotions. Because I don't know, Kate, if you were on here earlier, but I was sharing with Barb how my daughter discovered her voice of sass and like stood up for herself. And I'm like, oh, wow, I don't have to worry about anyone defending her honor. She's doing it for herself. But it's also being like, okay, I see this and I recognize this because I was very similar. And it's not saying she has this diagnosis, but it's like, okay, I need to teach her how to regulate that emotion so she doesn't fire back and, feel, hurt by that or whatever. It's about teaching. So I think that's what I've now focused on with my mental health is, oh, wow, I can teach this little like critter, like how to regulate themselves and work on mental health and maybe be the change for that generation. My focus has now been on her mental health and seeing other kids and maybe teaching parents, if they're overwhelmed and they're like, oh my God, my kid must have ADHD. They must have this. And I'm like, no, they just need to be taught to regulate their emotions. And then maybe they will have that later. And maybe that is something that they have to be on medication, but let's try some other ways to help put a name to a feeling. I think putting names to feelings help kids understand, right? They put a name to a color, they put a name to a letter. Why can't we do that for the feelings and the emotions and regulating that?
Yeah. And I think similarly too, like even talking about medication with the kids, like I take I have asthma too. So I take two different inhalers and take like a daily allergy med, like all the things. And then I was taking my other medicines and, my daughter was like, what's that one for? And I said, oh, that's for my lungs. And she's like, oh, what's that like inhaler for? And I was like, well, that's also for my lungs. And she's like, what's that one for? And I was like, well, that's for my brain. And she was like, what do you mean? And I said, well, it just kind of helps mama's brain work a little bit better. Like it helps me function a little bit better. So even talking about
is destigmatizing it.
Yes. Yeah. And so like giving that language to them to say like, this is how I'm feeling, or helping them, like you said, with breath work. Or we were just watching an episode of Sesame Street that had Elmo was belly breathing. And so we did some of that. And so, just like saying, this medicine helps my heart and this medicine helps my brain. And this, like it's just part of your body. It's something you take care of. And so it's similar to that. Like
it's normalizing it. It's not hiding the medication and like, oh my God, they can't find this. It's like, no, it is what it is. And mom needs this. You know what I mean? And that's okay. You may need it, but you may not.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
I love that. It's beautiful. I'm so with both of you. On this journey, I think I learned that caring for my mental health isn't like a nice thing to do, like a luxury or like when I have time. It's essential, right? And it's not just for me anymore. It's also for my daughter. I think, like you were saying, it models strength, it models vulnerability, and it models self-respect and self-care. I think one of the hardest lessons of motherhood that I've learned living with a mental health condition is that for me, that love alone doesn't fill your cup. You have to keep filling it yourself. And I think that for me means asking for help, admitting when you're struggling, and reminding yourself that perfection is not the goal. Presence is. So we're there. So no one should have to navigate this journey alone, as we've talked about. And I think the more that we all talk about mental health like we're doing today, the more we break down stigma for ourselves, for the next generation, it all makes a difference. So I just want to thank you both so much for sharing your stories, friends, and being here and talking through all of this with me today.
Yeah, thank you both so much. It's so healing, honestly, to be kind of in this room with you both and getting to talk about it, and hopefully helping some other folks too.
And I got to tell you, meeting other moms like you two, just hearing your stories makes me go, okay, I'm not alone. I'm not, losing my mind over here. Hearing about the, postpartum OCD, that is something I'm going to look into because I still feel that. And I just thought like, oh, I'm just must be, crazy. It's like just a symptom of bipolar disorder or something. No, it's like an actual thing. Maybe there's something that can help me get through that, And I think a lot of women are doing this alone. And I think that, I want to clarify that when I say to people, find a support system, it's not about finding like, a lover or a partner that's going to help you, because those partners sometimes are not what you need. You need another mom that's been through the experience or going through it with you to really not feel alone. Like I said, I had a whole family here, and it was not in this little room that I'm in, and I would just like cry. I felt so alone. So it's about finding connections like this, and if you could share that postpartum support group as well afterwards, that would be great, because I would love to share that with people as well.
100%. And before we conclude officially, I want to ask the question that we always ask every podcast guest on our show, and that is, the world can be a difficult place, right? And sometimes it can be hard to hold on to hope. That's why on each episode, we dedicate the last couple of minutes here to a special segment called Hold On to Hope. So I'll start with Alessandra and then move to Kate. Can each of you tell us what helps you hold on to hope?
Oh gosh, I'm so emotional now. I feel like what makes me hold on to hope right now, it's my daughter and her little friends. These brains are so fun to watch, and they're so exciting to see and grow and learn. And every day it's a new experience. And when I see, she takes a deep breath, and when she's feeling upset, and that calming thing, like that heart to heart connection, like when I hold her, I'm like, oh wow, like I have hope in the world, and I have hope in humanity, I think, when I see that. And I have hope that I'm doing an okay job as a mom, because I see how empathetic she is, and she'll, if there's a kid crying, she goes up, it's okay, like it's okay. And I'm like, oh my God, she's 2. Like, how does she know that? And maybe that's just like the aliens that made her or something, like it made her like that. But I like to think, it's because I'm an empathetic person, and she's seeing that, and she's copying that. And so I have hope that we can heal each other.
That's such a good one. I love that. The idea of healing each other. And parenthood is wild like that, isn't it? Like there's so much healing that happens by watching this little human grow outside of you. It's like the most, one of the most trippy parts of parenthood, I think, is sort of watching that happen. The thing that gives me hope, in addition to, Gen Z and our kids, which I guess are Gen Alpha, maybe.
What are they?
I don't know. And, Gen Z being so open and really, demanding the conversation to happen, like even in their workplaces, and getting to talk to some of our partners about that. And they're like, well, our younger employees are saying we have to make sure that, insurance plan covers mental health care and stuff like that. It's kind of amazing. But again, I mean, one of the reasons that NAMI's work is so important to me is because I think it is what sometimes, on dark days or in dark moments, like it is what I have come to really cling to in terms of seeing people really out there doing the work. Like NAMI's been around for 46 years. The organization has seen a lot happen and weathered a lot of storms. And I think that seeing, people like our advocates, even like on the, volunteers putting forth all of their voices to, push for Medicaid coverage, and really just seeing our team come together and having so many people so willing to, and both of you really, like seeing both of you be so willing to talk about your mental health and share your stories, and, knowing that there are people out there doing this and doing the hard stuff of sort of sharing their stories and working through their stuff and figuring it out, I think is really, really hopeful.
I love that. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
So this has been Hope Starts With Us, a podcast by NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illness. If you're a new or expecting parent looking for resources about mental health, visit nami.org/newparents. You'll find information about mental health before, during, and after pregnancy with practical advice and guidance from people like us who have gone through it. If you are looking for mental health resources, you are not alone. To connect with the NAMI helpline and find local resources, visit nami.org/help, text helpline to 62640, or dial 1-800-950-NAMI or 6264. Or if you're experiencing an immediate suicide, substance use, or mental health crisis, please call or text 988 to speak with a trained support specialist, or visit 988lifeline.org. It has been such a pleasure to be your host today. Thanks for listening, and be well.